Hello, and welcome to the Successful Storytelling Summit. I'm your host, Michael Arnold. Today, we're going to sit down with Dani Bostick. We shared a stage together at TEDx Greenville. Dani Bostick is an educator, writer, and advocate in Winchester, Virginia. Her current work as a teacher and prior experience as a mental health counselor have given her unique insight into the impact of trauma on students and the importance of trauma-informed classrooms. As a TED Ed innovative educator, Dani is part of a global cohort of educators chosen from around the globe to amplify the innovative ideas in education. For her TIE project, Dani created a toolkit to help educators maintain a healthy classroom environment while facilitating emotionally charged classroom conversations. Dani's written work on education, mental health, and sexual violence has appeared in the Washington Post, Huffington Post, Parenting, Marie Claire, and many other publications. Her first TEDx talk explored the use of the word victim through the lens of her experience as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, who first broke her silence and reported her perpetrator decades after the crimes occurred. Her second talk at TEDx Greenville talked about the effects of post-trauma syndrome on her from that experience. Let's sit down with Dani.
Was very structured, and the second one I revamped the night before. I mean, I knew what I wanted to say, and I think the feedback I got during the rehearsal really helped me nail down the kind of delivery and the way I needed to convey the message. So it wasn't a total, oh, I rewrote my talk. It just, I think one danger when people have an idea, especially, if you're a teacher, like you are, sort of somebody who's not a public speaker, but you're speaking a lot, you're training people or teaching, you're used to delivering information, but not in a public speaking kind of way. I think it just becomes a little lecture where you end up delivering it like you would have a PowerPoint behind you, or you're explaining something when somebody's confused about something in the classroom. And it's so part of that is, I think, making sure you're familiar with what a TED Talk is and what makes it different than here's some information I want you to have, because it's definitely different, and it's definitely something very specific that anybody could learn how to do once you're aware of the different components. But if you're trying, I've got this thing I want people to know, that's probably, I'd say 20% of it. 80% is packaging it so it's accessible and something it's going to resonate with people. It's something, if they're listening in the car, it's not too complicated, they can still process it. Some things that are absolutely going to stick in their mind, where they're not taking notes, but they're going to remember parts of it the next day or even weeks or months later. So that's something that's very, very different than the kind of talk that most people would give in the context of work.
Yeah.
Because people do ask. People are very curious about it. They're
Yep.
very curious. And, a lot of people aspire to have one. And I think it helps to know how to go about, not just getting an invitation to do a TED Talk or doing the TED Talk, but, that actually, how are you going to structure your idea?
Right.
I mean, both are, there's two equally important things, getting your foot in the door and securing one. But almost to do that, you really have to have a very solid idea, and not just that, a way of delivering it that's going to fit the TED, the TED style.
Yeah. Your story kind of starts a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
You just want to share a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So I'm going through life thinking I'm just normal like everybody else. And just really, I went to college, I had a family, and then at a certain point, I had gone to mental health counseling school. And part of an assignment was to write out the story of our lives. And I was like, a little skeptical. I just thought, okay, why can't I do a research paper? I tried to get an alternate assignment. And during the course of that assignment, there were just so many clues. When I wrote out my story and I reread it, I realized, oh, wow, I was abused as a child. And I was very skeptical of people who came forward later. So people who claim to be survivors of sexual violence or childhood sexual abuse and came forward later. I was probably like a lot of people, why'd they wait? And then I thought, oh my gosh, that's me. How did I not know that this had happened? So the long and short of it is I reported it to police, and I'm sure it happened because my perpetrator confessed on a recorded line, and he was in prison until January of this year. It was a 10-year sentence, and he served about half of it. So that experience of realizing I was a survivor of child sexual abuse, but not having had full awareness of it, was so surreal. And I had written an article around the time of my perpetrator's sentencing. I wrote an article for the Washington Post, and I got so much feedback from it. I mean, people were writing letters, looking me up. I was doing different internships, different places for mental health counseling. So I'd get cards sent to various places where I was working, which was a little unsettling in some ways. Like, wow, I didn't know it was that easy to find. But I realized that something about my story was resonating with people. So that's when I got the thought that it would be good to have a recorded talk, because the article's there, but I knew at that time I prefer to read versus watching a video or even listening, but I know a lot of people really liked video. So I thought this would be a really good opportunity for me to package some aspect of my story that resonates with people as a TEDx talk, and then that would just be out there for people to access, sort of like the written article I had done.
So how were you brave enough to talk about this on a TEDx stage? How did you actually end up on the TEDx stage?
Well, the first time I was in Colorado Springs, and I saw that they had TEDx Colorado Springs. So both times I self-nominated, so I filled out the form. And I mean, the first time, by then, I felt like you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I mean, I had already had a lot of, exposure because of the Washington Post article. There was local media in terms of, TV interviews. There was all kinds of stuff going on. So I wasn't afraid of telling my story, but when for the second one, we had to go to rehearsal. For the first one, I didn't go because I was too scared and I just couldn't face it. I didn't want to get up on the stage and have a bad practice, which is exactly what happened the second time. I got up there and had a really bad practice, and it was worse than I thought it would be. I mean, not my practice, but the way I felt knowing I'd had a bad practice was worse than my worst fears. But it was really scary because I just thought, wow, this organization has trusted me with one of their slots, one of their very few slots, and people are paying to be here, and they're going to be here all day. And I just got a little bit scared because I just thought, well, what if my message just really isn't worth sharing? And I had a lot of doubt going into it. And I was both times just literally shaking before I went up. It's very scary. It's really, really scary. And the part that was scary for me wasn't talking about child sexual abuse. Like, that part of it I do often. It was sort of, I guess, the responsibility of delivering. The process is so long, and like we had Deb working with us, our speaking coach. They invest so much in you, and then it's time to do it, and all I could think of is wow, I really better step up here.
So do you think that just that scariness was the biggest challenge that you faced from the TEDx stage?
I think so. I think both times that day, waiting to do the talk, I was really scared. And I've given talks before. I mean, I gave the baccalaureate address at my high school. It was an auditorium full of people. I didn't feel nervous there. I think with TED, and then because it's filmed as well, and it's the TED brand, and people expect a certain thing when they click on a TEDx or TED Talk. So I think it was also an opportunity I didn't want to squander. I just was very aware that, these are kind of hard to get. It takes a lot of preparation to find one, to apply for one, to go through that whole process. It's months and months of working on a talk. And it all comes down to those, around 10 minutes on the stage. And, both times I really felt that. Yeah.
And it's just intimidating getting onto that stage. But I don't know about you, but once I got up there, it was like you can see my hand shaking in the videos, but once I got up there, it was the adrenaline takes over basically. So.
Yeah. And I had notes for my talk, and I had them I can't remember if they're in my hand or my pocket, but I did ask before I went up. I was like, hey, I know because one thing is you're not supposed to have notes.
Right.
And at TEDx Greenville, Deb, and I thought her advice was really good. I mean, she was viewing the PowerPoint as kind of a barrier.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Colorado Springs, I had slides that helped me pace myself. And I used that as a crutch big time.
Yeah.
And I was very focused on the slides, I don't think I was looking at them, but I think I was more focused on the slides than the audience. So I think something that helped a lot at TEDx Greenville was not having the slides and being totally focused on the audience. And I asked a rhetorical question when I went out, and the audience actually answered it. And from that point on, I felt really good because I just thought, wow, they're really invested. I just said, what do you think of when you think of PTSD? And thankfully I paused because everybody started giving answers.
Yeah.
And I think that's another nice thing about a TED Talk once you're up on the stage is how invested the audience is. They're curious, they want to be there, they care. They're people who engage with ideas. So that had a calming effect, I think, both times, getting up there and seeing that people were engaged and interested and realizing, yeah, they're here to hear me too. There's a whole day of great ideas, and I have one of them. So I think both times when I got up there, I kind of settled down and realized, okay, I belong here. I have something worth sharing. But at Greenville in particular, it was, I was able to see people and kind of gauge their energy, and they were seeming interested. And then that helped me build a little bit of confidence as I went on. So probably similar to you, I was very nervous. And then once I started, I was like, okay, I think I have this. So because it goes by so quickly. And I think sometimes I had a couple missteps just in the way I was speaking. Like I got caught up on a couple words and it felt like it was going to be so awkward, and they didn't edit it out. And when you watch it, it just makes it natural and normal. Like there's a normal person giving a talk versus, like a performance. So, but yeah, it can be, that's a fear too. Am I going to get up there and just completely blank? So.
Yep, been there, done that.
And you recovered because I
recovered,
remember that.
yeah, from the TEDx experience. What's the biggest thing you've learned from it?
Well, I mean, just sort of on a really big level that I have ideas we're sharing, and lots of people do, because there's so many different talks about so many different things. So that was sort of the big, sort of touchy-feely takeaway. Like our messages matter, and it's important to get those messages out. And TED and TEDx is obviously an ideal platform for that, because that's their whole brand. But I think in terms of both processes, particularly the second one, the second talk, coincidentally, was around the time that I was alpha testing something called TED Masterclass, which I highly recommend. It's modules, and you go through them, and it teaches you how to do a TED Talk. So one of the things I realized that I've tried to do more, when I write or when I'm teaching, is the unit that was very transformative for me was the through line. You have to have something that is going through your talk, and that, in my case, it's my story.
Right.
So I think that was helpful for me, just to be able to transition from, being a teacher. I teach Latin. A lot of it's very structured, very regimented. Here's your information. To kind of transition from I'm giving you information to I'm telling you a story. And I think that that's important in lots of different contexts. I do a lot of advocacy and activism related to a couple different areas. And I think just having it in my mind, I'm telling a story. So yeah, we're angry about this. It needs to change, but there has to be a story there. Otherwise, people have trouble connecting. And I think one thing that's nice about TED is it a lot, like especially Jerry Blassingame's talk, is it's really hard to watch something like that and intellectualize. You're not just going to think about it in some theoretical way, like I learned something interesting today. You're going to be connecting with it on a personal level. And, whether you're more empathetic, or you're going to get involved in activism, or when you vote, you're going to be more aware, or you're going to think of people differently. I think that's what I realized sets, a TED Talk or TEDx apart from here's some information I want to give.
That's good advice. So is that the best advice you have for aspiring TEDxers? Do you have something else that you'd encourage them to try to do?
I think that's my best advice. I mean, because there's things I'm very bad at with the TED Talks, and I was joking. I mean, I joke about it a lot, but it's sort of like if Spock and Siri had a love child, it's me, so it's it's hard for me to get up there and be impassioned. I mean, I can do anger pretty well, or this needs to be different. But, when Deb was like, you got to, close your fingers and connect with people, I think, so I guess it's not just the through line, but it's remembering the humanity and the human connection and the humanness in whatever information you're delivering. And that could be, for a TED Talk, or it could be for something else. But I think it's impossible to do a TED Talk without some type of hyperstructure that is extremely relatable. Otherwise, it's a presentation at an academic conference or a lecture that you're giving your students. It's not a TED Talk. I think for me, what makes a TED Talk different. I mean, Deb was so helpful. Yeah. She has such little tips too. Like, I was practicing my talk and I was complaining about how aggressive I always look. And she just said, close your fingers. And it makes such a big difference. And now when I teach, instead of looking like I'm going to strangle someone, I mean, now it's a habit. If I did this, it would feel weird, but that's just how I spoke. And she said, it looks like you want to kill someone. I was like, oh, really? Is that why I look so aggressive? And she said, just close your fingers. And I mean, it was just that little tip, and it took a while to get used to it. But I think it just makes me more welcoming, especially teaching high schoolers on the first day. If my habit is to have my hands like I'm about to wring their necks, it's something that can be off-putting. But, she really explained it. And it was one of those little things I never would have figured out. Like, not to say, and, you read things and learn certain tips, but that was one I never would have, I haven't seen it anywhere. So she was a gem. She really was.
Yeah. Well, the thing she helped me with is I'm an engineer, and sometimes I have a bad habit of talking like this. And she's like, Michael, I don't understand what you're talking about. She goes, you've got to redo that, because if I don't understand it, your audience is going to understand it.
Yeah.
She didn't want me to dumb it down, but she wanted me to make it much more of a conversation. And that was hard for me, but really it's not, because I like telling stories. So I was like, well, if I'm going to make it conversational, I'm going to just tell a bunch of stories.
Yeah. And she was really honest too. I like that, because sometimes, you get feedback and, oh, everything's great. And you realize, this would be really efficient if you just cut to the chase and told me what I need to do. And I felt like she just made the most of the time we had and was always very direct, including during rehearsal when she said, don't worry, it's probably going to be, hope it's better tomorrow. And I just thought, okay, I trust her, and something's really wrong with what I'm doing. So I kind of revamped it, but she was great. I was really thankful that we had her.
Yeah. What advice do you think that you were given that you wish you had ignored when you got up on the TEDx stage?
Okay. So the second time around, and I don't remember who told me, I don't believe it was Deb, but I was convinced I had to memorize a talk. And because of my Siri Spock situation, that doesn't work well for me, because I'll concentrate really hard on the remembering part of it. So I think from the beginning, the second time, I wish I had a loose outline instead of thinking that I could memorize the talk and deliver it in an authentic sounding way. So I think I should have invested my time on the outline or parts of it. I mean, there were parts I had memorized where I know I'm going to say this. Every section I had something where I was going to lead in that was like the catch, or what we think of as a topic sentence if it's writing, some kind of hook for the section, and that would carry me through this. And I think that's important for people to know as well, because, I think there's two schools of thought in terms of, do you memorize or do you not memorize? And it feels to me that people skew towards, you have to have it memorized and you have to, but I could probably develop that skill, but I don't have it now. I didn't have it at that time. So I wish I had just done it the outline way and practiced it that way from the beginning. I think that would have saved me my, 12th hour scrambling the night before. And I think where I'd gone wrong, honestly, was that I was trying to deliver a talk that I had memorized. So I took the best lines out of it and then restructured it. So it was fundamentally the same talk, but it had a much stronger through line. And I didn't need to worry about the words I was going to use to convey. I was like, okay, this section I'm conveying these things. And I knew how long it would take to have a pretty good feel for that. But I think I should have done what worked for me from the beginning, because I do think they gave us that flexibility. I think I just felt like, oh, if I'm going to be a real TED TEDx speaker, I'm going to have to memorize it.
How can people connect with you and learn more about what you do and what you're trying to do?
Oh, sure. So I'm on Twitter. I'm not as active as I used to be, but it's Dani Bostick, DaniBostick. And that's also the beginning of my email address. So it's danibostick@gmail.com. And I do a lot related to trauma, child sexual abuse, other kinds of sexual violence. Well, it was good chatting with you. This was really
Yeah,
interesting. And I hope to, see it when it gets up. This was a good idea.
I appreciate your time. And it's good seeing you after all these years.
I know, it really is. Yeah.
We shouldn't wait two years before we talk the next time.